Hello, good evening and welcome to the Hot Seat. This evening our guest is a man who spent 14 years at the Capital Markets Regulatory Authority, and it's a great pleasure to welcome to the Hot Seat Malik Kader. Thank you for being in the Hot Seat, Mr. Kader. Nearly 15 years at the SEC, from pipes to cookers to paints and then to the regulatory authority. With your experience, did you paint a rosy picture?
Well, it was the intention of the SEC at that time to paint a rosy picture for the capital markets of Sri Lanka. With a suppressed economy that was suppressed for 30 years after the ending of the war, I felt that we had a greater mandate to develop Sri Lanka and also develop the capital markets and help and assist in the growth of the country.
So was that just hollow, or was there a real need to paint a rosy picture? Wasn't the opportunity available enough?
It was not necessarily painting something new. Mm-hmm. It was just opening the economy. The economy was automatically getting opened because it was suppressed for 30 years. Mm-hmm. So it was our job to provide the necessary regulatory infrastructure to take it to the next level.
What do you do now that you've sort of left the SEC?
Well, the circumstances I had to leave the SEC was that there was a special cabinet memorandum done, a special position created for me in the Ministry of Finance, and then I was removed from Director General of the SEC.
What was the circumstances of your removal?
As a senior advisor to the Ministry of Finance. That's a good question. We had a very strong commission, and there were 6 from the private sector, there were regular government officials, and then we had Mrs. Indrani Sukotadasa, who was appointed as the chairman of the SEC, and all these people were very powerful, and they wanted to do the right thing, and the message was very clear for us at the Secretariat that you have to do the right thing, because if you had crossed the path, well, that would be the consequences. So every member at the SEC, all professionals, right, were working within their mandate. And there were certain irregularities in the market, right? We had to go behind certain issues.
When you say when you had to do the right thing, do you mean that you had to toe the line? Is that what you mean?
No. When you say toe the line, not toe the line in a bad way. Mm-hmm. There is an act, SEC Act, there is a mandate in that act, and we had to basically follow that mandate. So that mandate was doing the right thing.
But doing the right thing, how easy was it under the Rajapaksa administration? They're being accused of abuse of power and sort of autocratic behavior. Those are the accusations that have transpired now. So how fearful was this ambience?
To answer that question, Faraz, I need to go back to the history of the SEC. It was created in 1987. I went to the SEC in 1996. Until 2010, we did not have any external interferences in the running of the affairs of the SEC.
So that is well into President Rajapaksa's term.
Quite right. In 2010, 2011, there were a lot of activities in the market. The market was 1,500 points, right, before the ending of the war. Soon after the war ended, the markets simply started shooting. And then the indexes went up as much as 7,800 points.
So instead of it going this way, it went that way.
It went that way, and it was not wrong in certain instances because, as I told you, it was suppressed. And all of a sudden you find it opening it out.
It was suppressed because of the war.
Because of the war.
Okay.
So up to a certain point, it had to go that way. Right? And after that, it has to ease out. So, fortunately or unfortunately, we were regulating during that particular period.
So the exchange was automated in 97?
97, that's right.
The first in Asia?
Yes, one of the first in Asia.
So it made your job as a regulator easy?
Yes, certainly there were automated trading systems, there were surveillance systems that were available, and then the difficulty we had was for us, the market also, there was a lot of market activity happening during that particular period. Stocks started moving up without any fundamental reason. That is where things went wrong.
But wasn't that an indication that the market, like you say, was suppressed? So when it was opened up and when investor confidence came in, it went up.
Right. So even when it goes up in that particular fashion, it has to go up with basic fundamentals.
But I have he said that he's not an investor, but he's a trader. He said that he doesn't care for these fundamentals. He said that it could be blue chip or chocolate chip. If it was right for buying and selling, he was in it. So maybe many people didn't care for the fundamentals.
Now that's the whole issue. We look at the capital markets, look at the stock market, look at the stock exchange. You see, the market is based, regulation is based on disclosure-based regulation. And then a stock to move up or down has to have some reason, has to have some fundamental reason.
But
for instance,
isn't speculation part and parcel of the stock exchange?
There has to be a certain amount of speculation in the market, no doubt about it. But it doesn't mean that the entire market has to be in that speculative mode. Right? There is a certain element in all markets. You find speculators.
So how do you differentiate between speculation and manipulation?
Speculation is where an investor basically doesn't take into consideration any fundamentals. Right? He looks at the market, right, and he thinks, his gut feeling. He's trading on his guts, right, whether the price of this particular security will go up or down. Right? He's a speculator. But manipulator is a slight of a, it's a totally different scenario. A manipulator is a person who knowingly takes the market up.
So,
Or in other words, he tries to pump the market, either up or down.
you mentioned pumping. It's the same, I presume, as pumping and dumping. So, as simply as possible, what on earth is pumping and dumping?
Pumping and dumping, there are different interpretations people have for pumping and dumping. There is a single interpretation available that is basically consistent. But in the Sri Lankan scenario, right, I think every one of us understand of only one type of pumping and dumping, where a group of investors would get together. They would basically pump the share up. Right? Now there again, what they would initially do is they will wipe the market out. Right? They'll mop the market, right, for these illiquid shares or mid-cap shares, they call it, and then they start buying and selling. If the share is 5
Amongst
rupees,
each other?
Yeah, if the share is 5 rupees, there is a buy order at 6 rupees by his friend. So the friend buys it at 6, and then again this guy puts an order at 8, and so it goes up.
So it goes up.
It goes
like
up.
that.
It goes up.
Yeah.
The problem here is when it goes up, the type of speculator you were talking, right, who doesn't see any fundamentals in this particular thing, but his gut says, look here, this stock is moving up, right? Let's get into the bandwagon. And they get into this whole thing. And then when the share goes up, right, the pumpers and the dumpers, they feel this is the time for us to now move out. They simply move out at a profit. And that poor chap basically...
So the retail guy, the little guy who bought it up there, now finds it down here.
Yes, he has paid, for instance, that 5 rupee share, he would have paid about 50 rupees, right, come back again to 5 rupees. So he's holding this 50 rupee share, right, not knowing what to do.
He might as well have gone to the casino.
Well, it's his call.
Right. What is then worrying is that this particular group of people who were accused or alleged in the press to be this cabal, this group of people who were pumping and dumping, they appeared to have really good connections.
Yes, they had very good connections. I think that is one of the reasons I'm not at the SCC even now. Right, my promotion to the Ministry of Finance as a senior advisor was a result of that.
To a large empty office, I'm told.
Yes, now there are people in the office, but I think there is a very strong chairman which has been appointed right now. I mean, we're waiting to see.
This is at the SCC.
At the SCC at the moment.
Right.
One of the things I thought I would mention about this whole thing was the war ended. The market was 1,500. Within a very short period of time, the market pumped up to 7,800. Right, and the P's, the Colombo Stock Exchange was very expensive at that stage. Was very unhealthy. It is because of that the SEC brought in certain regulations.
They were not very popular. The initiatives initiated during your time, along with Mrs. Sugata.
It wasn't popular with the people who were trying to do irregular activities in the market.
Okay, but fundamentally it was a good principle.
Fundamentally it was a good principle because when the market went up to 7,800 for us, the market was unhealthy. The market was led by stocks that were not fundamentally strong.
Do you remember offhand how many brokers there are in the market?
There are 29 brokers in the market.
So how many of these 29 are rogue traders?
That's a difficult thing for me to say.
But these people who had immense connections to the highest, we have the current chairman of the SEC on record as saying that he received a call from Mahinda Rajapaksa asking him not to take any action or to be kind to a certain group of people because they had supported him politically and so on. Of course, Mr. Karunaratne refused and he was out of a job. Now, you were part of the SCC under Mr. Karunaratne at that time.
No, not under Mr. Karunaratne.
Oh, you weren't?
No, I was not there with Mr.
Oh, you'd left by then?
I left by that time.
Okay. How do you think, how difficult do you think it would have been for the people there when the chairman is being told to take it easy? What do these guys below do? Do they just take their money and come in at 9 and go home at 5 and do nothing?
I think that's what these, you see, so-called investors who are basically up to irregular activities wanted the SEC to be. Right? An organization basically who just basically have people coming there and from 9 to 5 and then moving out, not doing any work, not regulating the market, not conducting investigations. The moment you do investigations, you call people. Actually, we call people for investigations. We had issues.
But were the
had a lot of pressures.
as far as you know, were the SEC able to summon these politically connected persons?
We summoned. In fact, as I mentioned to you, we had a very strong commission. We had Mrs. Indrani Sukhatadasu, who was the chairperson. We had
she had immense connections too. Her husband's the secretary to the president.
Yes, she had a lot of connections. So that is why we felt that we were strong. And we called everyone basically who crossed the line. And then when we called them for investigations, for interviews, to record statements, that is where things went wrong.
But strangely, Mr. Kader, I mean, Mrs. Sugata went home on her own accord. Mr. Karunaratne refused to play ball and to be politically correct, and he stepped off, was asked to step off. And then we had Dr. come in there, and he was part of this group that was being investigated. But then you found that he was made the chairman of the SEC. In recently, I've heard the terminology saying that it's like asking the rogue's mother. How good is that for a capital market?
Well, perception matters. Perception matters, particularly in capital markets. I'll not be able to contribute too much to what you mentioned just now, because there isn't anything on paper or anything on record to say that he's basically involved.
No, we're not saying that he was involved, but what we're saying is that he was part of this thing, and then he comes in there and he says, well, I won't be trading. Now, tell me that, when you were at the SEC, were you able to trade? Did you buy stocks and shares in your own name? Did you sell?
No,
Did you buy?
now employees of the SEC, that is in the Secretariat, right? The team which comes under the Director General, are prohibited from buying or selling shares.
Is the chairman under the same?
They can buy at an IPO, and they can hold on to that particular shares. If there is maybe an emergency, they need to keep the commission informed as to any reason they want to get rid of their stocks or shares. That bar isn't there for the commission, because the commission is a non-executive commission.
On this question of governance at the SEC, the Prime Minister's mentioned Colombo land in Parliament, of course underprivileged. But where we have a sort of look at that matter, we have a sort of an anomaly. We have Dr. Nalaka Godaheva. I think he was chairman of that company, and he was then made the chairman of the SEC. How does that balance out?
Right. Looking at, I might need to start with the SEC Act. The SEC Act says that there are 6 people that have to be appointed very specifically from the private sector.
Okay.
Right. Now, Sri Lanka has a very small pool of professionals. Right. Looking back, even the first chairman of the SEC was from the private sector, and he was a chairman of a listed company. So we have had the chairman of listed companies who held positions as chairman of the SEC, and we also had directors of listed companies serving as board members of the commission. So I don't see there's anything wrong in a chairman of a listed company being a chairman of the SEC, but there has to be that line which has to be drawn in terms of governance.
Rather fine line.
It's a fine line. It's a fine line that has to be drawn properly. And then if there's any matter pertaining to that particular company, right, he has to move out, not chair that particular session, get someone else to chair, and he also has to tell the secretaries not to give him the minutes of that particular issue which has been taken up. So you need to have proper disclosures in place. Previously, the SEC had those disclosures. I was not here during that particular period. So you need to have proper disclosures, right, being recorded, and then, that's the governance we're talking about for us.
But you also need pretty high standards.
Yeah, you need very high standards. You need very high standards.
Up to your time, how many criminal cases have been filed?
For us, that's a very interesting question. We have done a lot of investigations, the SEC. In 1996, there was a fairly big investigation which was done against a company. I think it was against fraudulent accounts. A case was filed in the magistrates' courts right in 1996. Today, in 2015, it is still in the Court of Appeal.
So how many? Since 96 to today?
There are about 30 or 40 cases that have been filed.
Criminal cases?
These are all criminal cases.
Right.
Because they're all criminal cases, okay. Right? So, in fact, if you're filing a case, looking at the legal system of Sri Lanka...
I'm actually told there was only one result, I think. One criminal result. Is it right?
No, that was the result I mentioned, and that was appealed.
Oh, okay.
Right?
So therefore, then I think it leads me naturally to this other strange word, compounding. What on earth is compounding?
In fact, that is the easy way, right? Looking at from the point of view of the investor, and not necessarily from the regulator, but from an administrative point of view, right? You basically file the case, right? And then the investor has an option of asking the matter to be compounded. So the commission basically would go through all the figures and then if necessary would compound. And for us in Sri Lanka, when a man has been investigated particularly, right, in the commercial sector, the moment a investigation is commenced, that man is basically socially gone. He's paid his price.
There was a lot of self-imposed self-censorship, they call it, because some journalists were killed, some have been attacked, presses have been burnt, nothing ever happened really, and the public, I think...
there was an era.
Yes, there was an era where they thought that if we bought a paper for 50 rupees or 60 rupees, then the onus was on journalists to find out all these things. But actually, what about the onus on public officials like yourselves? How much of that is owing to the public servants? Now they all say, well, we couldn't, we were frightened. Were you frightened?
No, I wasn't frightened because I had a very strong commission.
Right.
So that's why in fact, when Dr. Jayasundara called me and basically wanted me before he started, I said, Dr. Jayasundara, let's not beat around the bush. I'll give my resignation and I'll move out because I knew I could go out and do something myself.
Right.
But then he didn't let me move out. Right. But then for some, they could be intimidated.
So were you frightened when you left? Were you frightened?
I wasn't frightened. I mean, that is why I'm still here.
Is that also because you didn't really speak to the press, or the press weren't interested in speaking to you?
No, the press. I spoke to the press. There were banner headlines during my term.
Right.
There was one banner headline saying whether Malik or market.
Right.
Right. It was a banner headline. So there were. I think I did a little too much for the press. I should not have spoken to the press as much as I spoke. Right? I could have got maybe a press officer to do that for me. But nevertheless, I want to be open, right? And then I spoke to the press. And then, unfortunately, the other side, the investors, were more powerful where the press was concerned and where the politics was concerned. There was a very important meeting which actually the president shared.
This is a very famous one.
Very famous. I think that is one of the reasons that the commission was hurt. Right? It lacked a lot of protocol. Right? Technically, at that particular meeting, there should have been the chairman of the SEC and the members of the commission and the director general.
Do you think that this is one of those instances where the executive president didn't really sort of exercised too much of power and too much of interference, and eventually all these things played a part in people wishing to have a change?
Yes, I think that can also be one of the reasons. And one of the other things is talking about the executive president or basically having such powers. I think I would not blame him that much. I would blame the people around him for giving him wrong information and wrong advice.
What do you say? Do you think you'll ever go back to the SEC?
No. I've been the Director General once. Right? That's it. Full stop.
What's the message we need to give our international friends who are looking at investing in this country? How do we get them to come here?
Well, we need to... I mean, Sri Lanka is a small economy. Like our financial markets are very small. We need to transform Sri Lanka's financial markets, right, into a regional. Sri Lanka has to be a regional head, like Singapore, which is possible to do. right? So that is why basically, I mean, one time when we were there, we wanted to have a link with the London Stock Exchange, right? Where stockbrokers in London can see Sri Lanka stocks, Sri Lankan brokers can see London stocks. So Sri Lankan brokers can trade on London securities. That would have been a starter, right? Where Indian companies, Chinese companies would come to Sri Lanka to list to be traded in London.
And what is this next level?
No, to make Sri Lanka an international hub, financial hub.
In your own little way, what are you doing to do that?
Well, if basically our assistance, our advice is sought, we could certainly help the government basically to move in the right direction.
Well, Malikada, thank you very much for being in the hot seat today, and we look forward to perhaps having you again.
Thank you very much, Faraz. It was an interesting discussion.
Thank you.